Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today, well, we're going to start taking a look at some upcoming training camp battles, specifically the positions on offense for your Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, there's a big signing this week. Well, I guess relative to July, it's a big signing, I suppose, and that's bringing in wide receiver Dede Westbrook. That, of course, bleeds right into our conversation here today and how the Vikings will approach that wide receiver 3 position that Drew has been harping on for, 2 months now or so, something like that?
Long time. I mean,
So
this is actually probably during the Diggs and Thielen days. So, I mean, it's been a problem for a while now.
So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on that. Drew will finally have his shot to kind of break down what issues he has with that spot on the Vikings roster and how it could affect them down the road. And if we get to it, we'll also talk about some Aaron Rodgers stuff as well. I mean, again, we've been saying it for the last couple podcasts. Of course, he's not on the Vikings roster, but he's somehow influencing everything that the Vikings are going to be doing for probably not just this year, but also the future years to come based off of what he, apparently is planning on doing here, according to Adam Schefter. So that's the game plan for today's show. Let's get it started here right away. Let's start with that wide receiver position, just because, of course, Dede Westbrook is the main news here as of July 26th. Again, not a whole lot happening during the summer. Some of these signings towards like the very beginning of training camp, you have to be a little bit skeptical, but this feels like a good one. I mean, I'm excited about this signing. I want to temper my optimism a little bit because I got really excited about Tajay Sharp last year, and we know how that turned into about 3 targets and 1 catch.
Right.
So I think Dede Westbrook's a different player though, and I think he adds different dimensions that are immediately can have a high impact on what the Vikings are going to try to do in 2021.
Yeah, it is kind of the cycle, right, where the Vikings sign some receiver to, not a big name receiver per se, but somebody that's recognizable and is kind of expected to come in and fill a role. And that guy generally kind of doesn't pan out. It's sort of been this theme over the years. Whether you go Mike Wallace, kind of more in the past, and more recently, obviously Tajay Sharp from last year is kind of the more recent example. But a couple of reasons you have to like Dede Westbrook. First, Keenan McCardell, that kind of connection there.
Of course.
The new receiver coach from the Minnesota Vikings, Dede Westbrook, played for him back in Jacksonville. And so there's obviously some familiarity there, and you'd think it'd be pretty seamless for the transition for a guy being on a different team, but having the same position coach. That's got to be a really nice move. And, obviously Dede was comfortable with it based on his social media postings and whatnot, that he kind of wanted to be in Minnesota. McKeenan kind of persuaded him, and the Vikings didn't really let him leave to go visit another team without a deal. So obviously there's, both sides wanted this to happen. And number 2, I think what I like the best too is that, he can play a lot of slot. I think 70-80% or something of the snaps in Jacksonville were from the slot, which I like because you get Thielen outside, Jefferson outside, and then Westbrook can be sort of the guy in 3 receiver sets in the slot if you want to go that route. So I think this really puts a target on Chad Beebe's back a little bit, because that's kind of that's sort of his specialty the slot type guy. And so in camp, I think he's got a lot to prove if he's going to make this roster now because of this move. So I love the move in the sense that it had to be addressed. You could not go into training camp with your number 3 receiver being BC Johnson or Chad Beebe or whoever else. You had to pick someone else, at least with some experience. Dede Westbrook is that guy. The familiarity with Keenan McCardell, it just made a ton of sense.
Absolutely. So, from a wide receiver sense alone, it seems like it's pretty solid pickup, right? Dede Westbrook, of course, did not play much in 2020, 2 games on the stat book last year. He tore his ACL. That has to be a concern, right? I mean, he did there's no good time to tear an ACL, of course, but he did tear it early on in the season. You have to expect that progress has been made. If you think about the progression that Joe Burrow has made already, and he's expected to be starting the team with training camp, I feel like the Vikings wouldn't have made this move without feeling fully comfortable with his situation in his knee right now. Now, that being said, I think that there's still reason to be somewhat concerned. It's a lot easier to re-injure your ACL for one. That's one thing. Number 2, this is a guy who has made a living, whether it was at Oklahoma as a college playmaker or in the NFL with the Jacksonville Jaguars, is a guy who is great with the ball in his hands, right? eluding defenders, getting around players, making moves, making plays with his eyes.
Mhm.
Um,
Has
this is
been
a
a
guy
return
who
guy before too, I believe.
exactly, and that's what I was going to get to as well. But my point being here is that a knee injury can affect a skill player of that nature a lot more than it may affect someone who doesn't need to put as much, strain on their knee. Dede Westbrook is a guy who's going to be attempting to be elusive. He's going to be attempting to, he's going to be one of those guys that actually runs a 40-yard dash in the NFL because he will run that 9 route. And most importantly, like kind of what Drew just said is, if nothing else with this player, you're probably getting your starting punt returner for 16 games, assuming his health holds up, because the Vikings have not been able to catch anything in terms of punting the punt returns. The last basically since Marcus Sherrill's left, the Vikings have had issues with fumbling the football. Uh, this gives you a secure player to put back there that also gives you some explosiveness as well. This is a guy who has scored on punt returns. This is a guy who's has been dangerous since he was 18, basically, with the ball in his hand. So for those reasons, it's a huge signing, especially relative to the contract value. He's not breaking the cap for this guy, and it's basically a 1 year, like, let's see if this works situation. It makes a lot of sense. And then you just have to throw in what Drew was saying before and how he blends in with Jefferson and Thielen as well. You can mix and match your targets now. You can move all these guys around the formation. You could do different things in the slot. Hey, you can put Dede there 80% of the time if you want, but you can also try to get mismatches with Adam Thielen. We've seen him work extremely well out of the slot, and we've seen Justin Jefferson play well from there as well. So it gives you more versatility. It gives you more concepts that you can use. It opens up the playbook even more. And this guy, to me, he's like Cordarrelle Patterson, not quite the burst of electricity that Patterson is, but much more fundamentally sound. I expect Dede Westbrook to be able to get open on one-on-one coverage, whereas with Patterson, we had to manufacture touches for the guy. He's like that type of player in terms of being able to manufacture touches for him, but he can also get open on his own as well. So I think that this looks like a really good move, but again, you have to temper some level of your
Right.
expectation because this is happening in the middle at the end of July when the Vikings have a direct need. And like you said, you couldn't go into training camp with the fight between Chad Beebe and BC Johnson for that
Yeah.
number 3 spot. Now you have a true competitor, a guy who has worked with Keenan McCardle, as you said, and also a guy who brings, a vast knowledge of how to play the position in a different way from a different organization. He's had multiple, seasons over 500 receiving yards. I'm not saying that this guy's going to break he's not going to break any records, but over 500 receiving yards in multiple consecutive seasons in the NFL, that's an accomplishment and something that you can work with, especially as a number 3 wide receiver.
Right. I mean, that's a solid number 3 receiver output, especially for a team like the Vikings that I still think even with the signing, they'll probably be in that, 2 receiver personnel quite a bit. I would imagine it's still going to be a lot of Mike Zimmer likes to run the ball and whatnot. And so I will say too, though, that, we should also not forget about Amir Smith-Marset too, which I think he almost has a better chance to be a contributor than like BB now. Because he's got that explosiveness out of Iowa and he can be more of a return guy too. So I think the Vikings are, not, I still have concerns about the depth, but it's certainly a lot better just by adding this guy that has experience, that has, the pedigree, like you said, at 500 yards a couple times. And he just has that experience that, the BC Johnson doesn't, that Chad Beebe doesn't. And the guy that you can rely on if needed on 3rd down and 5 or 6. And they're, the opposing defenses bracketing both Jefferson and Thielen. You got, okay, now I have to trust my 3rd guy in the slot to win against the slot cornerback. Dede Westbrook certainly gives you a better chance than anybody else on the roster.
So last thing here on Dede Westbrook too is just you have to kind of, and for those of you, and I'm sure there's most of our listeners out there, watched him play to some degree at Oklahoma in 2016. He put up 1,500 yards, had 17 touchdowns, total of 1,600 scrimmage yards. Like, this guy was electric in college football. I feel like if you're going to gamble on someone who's done it before at a very high level. And granted, yes, this is college. It's different from the NFL. But Oklahoma,
also Big 12.
Yeah, I was going to fair point. But I think that when you look at the body of work from Dede Westbrook, there's reason for optimism with this signing. Whereas maybe last year when we were talking about Tajay Sharp, we were trying to find reasons for optimism. I think it's a little bit different situation here. I think this, hopefully will work out at least as from a return standpoint, will be a huge benefit to the Vikings roster. But I am interested in that wide receiver battle a lot more now
Yeah.
because of his presence. So let's dive into that a little bit more here. Obviously, Jefferson and Adam Thielen are your 1A and 1B. That's not changing. Nothing's going to happen between now and the start of the season for that to be affected. We're most interested in what happens at that wide receiver 3 spot, or just the third guy that's going to come out there, technically the third or fourth guy, depending on what the situation may be. The candidates: Olabisi Johnson, Chad Beebe, of course, who we just went over, Dede Westbrook. You've also got second-year guy KJ Osborne, who was, I guess, drafted more to be a return guy, but did not do so well as a return guy last year. You've also got, the rookie from Iowa that Drew just mentioned, Amir Smith-Marset, and then a couple other undrafted free agents as well, and then Dan Chisna, who I don't really have much hope for as a wide receiver at the NFL level, but great special teams player. So those are your candidates. I think there is a new clear-cut favorite, assuming Dede Westbrook is able to memorize the playbook. Do BC Johnson or Chad Beebe have a shot here? I think there's a rumor floating around that Chad Beebe had unfollowed the Vikings on Instagram and done this whole
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, 2021,
does he have a
things
right
like
to be
that
upset?
happen.
Does he have a right to be upset? Because does he even have a chance now?
Well,
Is it over?
it'd be one thing if he had established himself and had been, Kirk's go-to security blanket for the last couple of years on whatever, but that's not what he's been. And so it's, I think especially now that Dede's in there, he can play slot, but also he can play outside. BC can go outside too. I really think this is the advantage goes to BC for having the shot the fourth spot even too. And so from there, then after that, I really kind of see some sort of high ceiling, low floor type value for Amir Smith-Marset where he could really boom. But he also may not turn into much. It's one of those kind of boomer bust guys. So I think the Vikings, from that sense, will just have to keep him to kind of see what he can do. And at that point, it becomes a numbers game, I think, for BB, where if the Vikings want to keep 6, they want to keep 5. Receivers, who knows exactly, and also could be a special teams thing too, because Chad B might need to play special teams. You mentioned Dan Chizina, who played special teams last year, KJ Osborne, return guy. So there's going to be a familiar name from last year's roster. Chizina, Osborne, or BB, one of those three for sure. Maybe multiple of those names will not be on the roster next year or this coming year.
I mean, how many can you really keep? We've seen the Vikings in recent history only keeping 5 receivers. We have seen them, at least since you and I have started, I guess, quote, covering this team. We've seen them go up to 7 before. I don't think they're going anywhere close to that being a run-first team and probably keeping 3 running backs once again. So I think 5 wide receivers is probably the number to set. Of course, you're going to have Jefferson and Adam Thielen up top. Dede Westbrook is going to make the roster barring some kind of crazy incident. That gives you 3. That's 2 spots left there. I think the point that you're making with BC Johnson versus Chad Beebe is important here because the flexibility that BC Johnson offers, or just the ability to play that X or that flanker role on the outside, gives him more value on this roster because you have so many guys that have the flexibility to go into the slot. You don't need a niche role guy like Chad Beebe to play the slot. This isn't the Bills where you directly need to have Cole Beasley as your slot guy. The Vikings can put in basically anyone in their top 3 into that slot position, and you can feel good about that. Not just comfortable, good. Like Adam Thielen is a straight up mismatch for most players. He showed that mostly in 2019. Justin Jefferson, hell, most analysts didn't think he was even going to be an outside wide receiver. They were all wrong.
He played a ton of slot in college, and that people were like, "Oh, can he play outside?" And I think he kind of
proved everyone's wrong in about a year, right? Or not even, probably like 6 games. But my point being here is that you have so much flexibility in your main prime 3 guys. There's no purpose for a Chad Beebe really anymore. I don't think, unless he's returning punts, which I think Dede Westbrook is going to be returning punts now, unless he's the starting slot guy and he's blowing everyone away. Like he's the definitive best route runner outside of Jefferson and Thielen. Like he knows the playbook the best. I don't see a way for him to make the roster anymore because Dede Westbrook can do everything he can and more at a higher level, or a higher ceiling, I should say, assuming he comes back to play the same way he was when he was in Jacksonville pre-injury.
Right, and there's, it sucks for him because he's coming into camp and whether we like it or not, like that was he had a really good opportunity to be a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. But he didn't he just didn't establish himself as that opportunity, earning that opportunity prior to this year. So I have no qualms with the decision. I'm glad they finally addressed their position because, as you said, I've been harping on that for the entire offseason for sure, that the Vikings needed to have somebody they could rely on a little bit outside of Jefferson and Thielen. And, again, I don't think, besides, if you were to rank the receiver groups from kind of, after the top 2 receivers on a team, I don't think the Vikings are that high still. But I think this really helps them and probably brings them out of the bottom dwelling rankings in there. So I like the move. It's a simple move, and it's also really cost effective because I don't think it was very, very close to the vet minimum for a year. So no reason to dislike that at all. And then, I totally agree with you. I don't see, and there is training camp yet to be had. I don't want to dismiss training camp or, dismiss the idea that BB could really have a productive camp and earn his way onto this team. But I right now, I think he's on the outside looking in.
The route to getting back in is also super difficult now, I think. Like I just said, so if the Vikings keep 5 receivers, right? These are my 5. Jefferson, Thielen, Dede Westbrook, of course, who just got added, BC Johnson, and probably Amir Smith-Marset, because I don't think he's clearing through waivers if you're trying to put Smith-Marset back onto your practice squad. I don't see that happening because I think barring something nuts, he's going to have a really good camp, and he's going to put good tape up there where someone's going to want him.
He's going to be that guy, too, that makes enough splash plays where people notice.
I think he's like a Jarius Wright. That's kind of what I see, sort of. I don't necessarily know if that's the ceiling or the floor, but that's kind of what I see from watching Amir Smith-Marset, and that's a rosterable player. So if you're keeping 5, all of a sudden now maybe you keep 6 to keep Chizina on the team as a special teams guy. I think you put KJ Osborne then on your practice squad. I think he clears through waivers if you release him and try to re-add him. So really, I don't think, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Chad Beebe has practice squad eligibility left. So he's kind of shit out of luck in this situation.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Now, I'm with you. I can't confirm that. I know they maybe expanded. They certainly expanded the eligibility last year.
Right.
And if that might carry into this year, it might not. They may have modified it, but I do think his job, at least as a wide receiver on the 53-man roster, I think that's certainly in jeopardy right now.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on from wide receiver here. I think it's pretty clear cut that both of us stand that Westbrook's going to be that wide receiver 3. A lot, of course, a lot can change in a day.
Yeah, this discussion was going to get more interesting as we had planned it, but then Dede Westbrook signed, and it's kind of, it's already set in stone, it seems like.
It definitely seems that way. So, and barring something crazy, that's what's going to happen probably. But there are some more interesting offensive positions here to take a look at. Offensive line, of course, is one that we naturally want to highlight. The main camp battles here are between the rookies and the veterans, right? Left tackle is going to be some between Christian Darrisaw and likely Rashad Hill, I imagine. You also have at the interior spot at right guard, Dakota Dozier is the incumbent. I
like the term. It's an accurate term,
It's the most accurate term I can use to describe him, to be honest with you. And then Wyatt Davis, the 3rd round guard out of Ohio State. I think those are the 2 primary kind of camp battles to look at along the offensive line. Of course, there are a few other things that could shake out, but I tend to believe Ezra Cleveland already has his spot locked up. Brian O'Neill, of course, then Garrett Bradbury by seniority, I think it's a start as well. So to me, those are your 2 main spots. That right guard spot with Wyatt Davis, attempting to fight his way into that role, and then Christian Darrisaw, the 1st round pick, who I think, in theory, you'd think as a 1st round pick might have more leverage to end up in that starting role week 1. But we've seen what Mike Zimmer has done in terms of his approach. Like, I think this is important because while Darrisaw and Davis as well, I think, are probably your 2 best players at their respective positions in terms of overall value, talent, that type of thing, they don't have the seniority that Mike Zimmer loves with regard to starting week 1 in September.
Right, and that's the question I was going to bring up is Zimmer likes to kind of, most of the time he brings along the rookies a little slow. And so, I think, I'm just expecting the first, camp practice, right, when the media gets in there and they can see the depth chart and everything and they start reporting it, it's going to say Rashad Hill, left tackle number 1, and Darrisaw, left tackle number 2, and then vice versa. Or, well, the same for right guard. You're going to have Dozier at starting right guard, followed by Wyatt Davis. And, people might freak out and think, well, what's going on? But that's pretty standard. That's probably what I'm expecting. Now, I do think Darrisaw will end up starting week 1. I'm a little bit more unsure about Davis, but those guys certainly will get their shot to earn it in camp and in preseason, just because of, well, let's face it, the offensive line is pretty poor last year. Rashad Hill, for his, he's a pretty darn solid swing tackle. Like, one of your tackles goes down, the fact that he can come in and play either position is awesome, and it's nice to have. Don't like him as a starting left tackle for this team.
We saw a glimpse of what that looks like.
Same for Dakota Dozier. So I guess these aren't really dramatic battles per se, because I'm agreeing with you that I think Cleveland's got left guard set finalized pretty much. Bradbury at center, O'Neal at right tackle. He might get an extension before the season starts. So it's really just those two positions that I think could be interesting here. But again, I still favored both the rookies to end up as the starters during the season.
I tend to kind of lean in agreement with you that Darrisaw is probably your week 1 starter. I just think the level of ability will come out immediately.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're going to see just the differential in terms of the ceiling from Darrisaw to Hill immediately. We know who Rashad Hill is, and he is exactly as you described, an excellent swing tackle that you can slot in there if needed. He has been one of the most consistent players in terms of getting thrust into a bad situation and giving you good reps. He's done that for what? It's been 5 years now.
Yeah, I think it's 5 years now. I think it's 5 years, and he's never like so a guy like that just comes in off a practice squad, and it is actually admirable to come in and not be. I don't want to say this and make it sound like every offensive lineman's bad, but like come in and hold your own. Is impressive, especially when things are moving around and you don't really know what position you're going to go into on game day, if you're going to go in at all. And he goes in there, he fights like hell, and he holds his own, which is admirable, I think. So, but with that said, Darrisaw is my starting left tackle.
The thing is too with this guy is that with Rashad Hill is most people don't even notice the good traits that he does have, because you only notice offensive line play typically. And this has changed in the recent years with the Vikings because of how much of an influence offensive line play has had in the result of the team's season. But you really only notice offensive line play when someone sucks. And so you barely even notice the 15 or 20 snaps that Rashad Hill comes in, plays very well, doesn't allow any pressures, doesn't allow a sack, any of those, bad plays that would honestly probably get him recognized a lot easier. That's why you don't know, or maybe if you do, you know that he's kind of a bit of a sleeper, but he's still not a starter. And so that makes it, taking away the ability to slot in Rashad Hill whenever you need him most also hinders his ability to become a starter on this team, because the value he brings as a swing tackle. Like, if Darrisaw gets hurt, you can put Rashad Hill in there. You don't know on the vice versa, right? If Rashad Hill gets hurt, and he's your, in theory, your best player, and you have to throw a rookie in there that you're not totally confident in, that formula all of a sudden doesn't work as well. I think the inverse is a better option. Go with Darrisaw from the start. See what the guy's got. You just spent a first-round pick on him. You obviously feel good about his situation and his ability to work on this team. You have to give him the opportunity from the start. Whereas with Wyatt Davis, it's kind of the flip, where it's like you don't have as much confidence based off draft position, based off of, I guess just inherent value of the player position. You don't have as much, you don't need to throw Wyatt Davis in there as much. You need to have success at the left tackle position. Otherwise, Kirk Cousins is just going to continue to sit pressure too hard, and the offense isn't going to go anywhere.
Well, I just think with Darrisaw, I think the point you made about spending a first-round pick, see what he's got, there's really no reason not to throw him in right away. So at guard is one thing, because we talked about how guard I have very little, I don't put a lot of value at the guard position. So I'm not going to be too concerned with what the Vikings do there. But at left tackle, the guy you drafted first round, you gotta give him that chance early on, I think.
last question here, and then we'll dive into a bit of Aaron Rodgers and then get out of here. But we brought up Mike Zimmer's tendency to sit rookies, whether that's Stephon Diggs for probably too long, or name Jefferson probably too long. I mean, pick your guy, right? There's been plenty of them since Zimmer arrived in 2014 where it kind of feels like he didn't put him in early enough. Is it right? Are we fair to criticize him for that? Or should we just be like, all right, the coach knows what he's doing. He knows when to play him.
Well, because on the other side, it's like Laquan Treadwell, where he should have never been playing at all. Like there are guys, I mean, so I get the hesitation in some respects, but I mean, it is tough though. Cause like when you have a superstar, you don't really know it until you find out. But if you have a complete bust, you also don't know until you find out. So it's, I get the hesitation. And if you're comfortable with the guys that you're playing, that's fine. But in a way, like you have to get Justin Jefferson in your week 1 lineup heavily. You have to get Stephon Diggs in your rotation, dressing on Sundays sooner than week 5 or whatever it was that year. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, especially if you draft him that high, like as Darrisaw, you got to get him in the game. I mean, it's one thing if it's a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick.
A little different situation with Darrisaw. That's why I think this is a fair question.
If you spend a first rounder on a guy, give him the chance early and often, I think.
Okay, last thing here. So Brian O'Neill, of course, is the Vikings' right tackle. He's been a stable force, all-pro caliber player. There have been rumors, discussions, online discussions, I should say, like Reddit discussions about moving Brian O'Neill to left tackle. That would throw a wrench into basically this entire discussion.
Are these conversations happening post drafting Darrisaw?
I think to a degree, because then you see flipping Brian O'Neill to left tackle, having him be your guy at left tackle long term, and then having Christian Darrisaw being your road grader right tackle. That's essentially going to fill Loadholt role, a guy that could obviously play, left tackle at a high level as well, but maybe he's better suited based off of his talent or what have you.
I mean, I don't know a whole ton about offensive line, fundamentals and things like that, but I mean, I keep Brian O'Neill at right tackle, especially now that you're gonna.
I think that's the whole discussion right there, to be honest with you. Like, does it make more sense to keep a guy who's had a ton of success at right tackle
I'd say keep
at the
him
same
there.
spot, or do you challenge him and say, okay, maybe this guy could be what we thought Matt Khalil was going to be? And
there is that possibility, but I think
that gamble. Is it worth the risk?
At the very least, you see what Darrisaw has. You don't want to draft your franchise left tackle or a guy that could be that, and then kind of throw that away, put O'Neill in there, and things could crumble on that. You want to see if Darrisaw can be that guy first, I think, and then maybe down the road, you can maybe try O'Neill out there if it gets to that point if Darrisaw doesn't work out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am under the belief that O'Neill's played so good at right tackle, you just have to keep him there long term, because he's proved it time and time again now that he is a NFL caliber all-pro level tackle on the right side for sure. That. It's like, why would you give that up? Why risk it? Why risk it when you think you might have a left tackle in Christian Darrisaw? You don't know. Why risk it before you don't know?
Right.
So I'm with you. I think that discussion is ridiculous, and that's kind of the internet for you. But okay, so last piece here. I think that about rounds out the offense. I don't think that there's anything, maybe back end wide receivers.
Kirk Cousins will be your quarterback. Dalvin Cook will be your running back. Tight end's going to be Irv Smith, Tyler Conklin. I mean, there's nothing else to discuss.
Yeah. Back end running back 3 between Amir Abdullah and Kene Ngawu. I probably butchered that name. Sorry.
I think you did.
Yeah, that's not good. Hopefully he gets cut. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers briefly, because this saga is reaching its climax and super entertaining from a Vikings fan standpoint. So I think that you guys will love
it's sad that we're going to kind of have to end all the kind of jokes and memes and stuff about, gosh, well, it's a shame, Rodgers might not come back, but I think it's cool. So the official report, I believe, was that he and the Packers sort of almost reached an agreement to, have him come back this year and essentially give him that opportunity to leave after 2021. And it's worded a bunch of different ways based on whoever your insider is, but essentially they're going to review it after next year. They're going to kind of void 2023 in the contract. 2022 is going to be an opportunity for him to be sort of traded somewhere else, wherever he wants to. Or if he actually ends up liking Green Bay more, he can stay and play out that 2022 season. So I think I also saw something about they kind of came together and they agreed on something once Rodgers demanded Randall Cobb get traded for, and I saw his name in there. Like, I don't know what's all going on, but in a way it's sad that, Rodgers is going to play for the Packers this year, but also it's like, in a way, there's an end in sight for Vikings fans where the Packers don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback on their roster, to play against.
Doesn't seem like it. I'm very confident that they don't.
Yeah. There's an end in sight, that, okay, and maybe it's next year, it's the year after that. Finally, the Packers might have some struggles at the quarterback position, and we'll finally get to watch that unfold.
Okay, so a couple things. Short term kind of sucks because he's going to be really good this year, and that's going to be
I mean, I never actually kind of
I don't think I did either, but it was a possibility 24 hours ago. It's not really a possibility anymore. I wanted that dream because I'm nervous. I'm very much concerned that he's going to max out this year for sure.
Oh, he should, and he will.
He's the type of guy who is going to love walking away from the Packers, and he definitely wants to walk away as like a Super Bowl champion. So he's going to bring his A game. The same thing's going to happen from Devontae Adams, because it sounds like Devontae Adams is going to play 1 year, try to max out his ability to make sure that he can get the optimal results in the free agent market, and then he'll probably go sign with Oakland and play with his best buddy Derek Carr. And then Aaron Rodgers will move on, go do his thing, and the Packers will be, in theory, bleeding, right? But that's your long-term reality. In the short term, you have to be, a little bit concerned. But the long-term reality,
if you're a patient Vikings fan, this is a good thing.
This is a great thing. Exactly. Yeah. If you're a patient Vikings fan, you understand probably, and I really think this is a fair take. The Super Bowl window is not open right now. It might be open starting next year if you can do a couple things right, if a couple things go the right way, if Darrisaw turns into an all-pro, if Kirk Cousins leaves and Kellen Mond turns really good, there's a lot of things that can happen.
That last if was just massive. Like, those ifs slowly got bigger. Like, if Darrisaw becomes an all-pro, if Cousins leaves and Mond becomes good.
I think it's, to a degree, it's fair because I don't think the Vikings are a Super Bowl contender right now, but they could be very, very soon if a couple things go the right way. It could also just be Kirk Cousins is really, really good all of a sudden. I don't know. I'm just saying I have seen Kirk Cousins. I tend to think that
here's the deal. Here's what we know. Vikings Super Bowl window right now, probably not open. Okay. So
thank you.
The fact that, if the Packers have Rodgers, who cares, right? Because it's, to me, it's not affecting the Vikings' chances really one way or the other. Yeah, they might have a better chance to win the division, but they're not doing anything in the playoffs with this team if they go 9-8 and win the NFC North, right? But the Packers, if they have Rodgers, they can win the North. Vikings don't have to deal with playoffs. Packers can go in and lose another NFC Championship game. Fine by me. End of the day, I think it's good to know that there's an end in sight, and it seems clear too still, which is entertaining for me, that Packers were not able to satisfy Rodgers completely. Like, he's coming back because ultimately they didn't budge. They just weren't going to make him happy. It got to a point of like too much pride on either side where the Packers didn't want to give Rodgers the satisfaction of demanding his way out. And so instead of the Packers potentially maximizing trade value, instead they're like, you know what? No, we will make you stay here for a year. And they came to that agreement last minute. So I don't know, whatever. This is kind of the conclusion everybody sort of expected, but at the end of the day, there's an end in sight for the Packers having an elite quarterback there to pick apart the Vikings, and I'm glad that's finally coming to an end here in the next couple of years.
I'm going to knock on wood with that because one thing, that condition in Aaron Rodgers' updated contract that says he has the opportunity to play for, quote, who he wants after the 2021 season. That includes the Green Bay Packers, by the way. Don't think that the Packers aren't going to try to connive their way into making Rodgers stay. And I know you're not saying that, but I'm saying I kind of want to knock on wood here because what happens if the Packers go 7-10, have to blow up the team, then you fire Gutekunst or however you pronounce his last name, and effectively get rid of the problem, and now you get Rodgers for 4 or 5 more years. Like, you want him to play well, I think, this year. Show up the Green Bay front office
See,
and then basically give a big middle finger and say, I'm out.
what I want is the Packers to be like a 10-win team, like a 9 or 10-win team, where they're like it's obviously a disappointment from the last couple of years, but like it's not enough to fire or blame the GM, and get rid of his job. Then I think Rodgers is like, yeah, I'm done. Like a 10 or 11-win team.
Yeah, I think the Vikings can compete with that too. Like, what if they're a 9 or 10-win team, they win the North, but they lose to the Vikings twice? Like,
well, that would be awesome.
Like, I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, ultimately, I think you're right. For the patient Vikings, this is a good way to end that show. For the patient Vikings fan, this is a good thing because the end is near. Hopefully, it seems that way, and it also seems like the Vikings are moving in the right direction. At least, the last few moves that they've made. I feel comfortable with the guys that they've drafted recently. I think the Vikings are trending up, Packers are trending down, and from my vantage point, that's a good thing. I think that's a good place to end this show. So, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I mean, we got training camp finally started here. It's kind of weird. We're already in football season. It's exciting, but it's weird. I don't know. I did see something that I did want to point this out. So Madden ratings came out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or the receiver ones. They didn't have Justin Jefferson in the top 10. And it's now just apparently there's a big rivalry going on between the Chargers Twitter and Vikings Twitter because of the whole
funny, yeah.
Justin Herbert thing last winter with the Rookie of the Year award. And now Chargers Twitter account, the official one, was gloating about Keenan Allen's receiver rating being higher than Justin Jefferson's. And so it's funny to watch that all unfold, even though ultimately Madden ratings are quite possibly the farthest thing from an indicator of how good a player is. So interesting.
It's pretty funny, though.
Yeah,
and I do love the Chargers Twitter account. I wish they didn't have a vendetta against the Vikings because their social.
Well, their
media
best
team
tweet
is
was from
hilarious.
2007 when it was the PF Changs or whatever.
Yeah,
That's the best one. They still have it up.
it's great. All right, then. Well, I'm excited for fans. By the way, small little piece there that next year the Vikings are gonna have fans in their stadium again, and just even from a TV standpoint, like I'm just excited for that. So it's nice to have this thing coming up. We'll continue on with this discussion about training camp and so forth as we lead up into the season. That'll be the game plan moving forward here. As far as where you can find us, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast. If you prefer to watch the show, Drew and I are available on YouTube. That being said, I look terrible today because I'm sick and my voice is awful as well. So thank you for fighting through this with me. Check us out on Daily Norseman as well. The rest of the Climbing the Pocket team we're currently putting together a content schedule for the entire season right now. And it sounds like we're going to have stuff dropping every single day of the week. So keep an eye out for that. Check us out. Yeah, like I said on Daily Norseman, I read the comment section. I was talking with a couple of you guys on the last show. Seemed like you guys didn't like that one. Hopefully this one was better. We're always trying to improve. I don't take any of that stuff personally. I think it's funny.
I brushed up on the law of averages just for those comments.
Thank God. I think our audience would appreciate that. So as always, guys, we're just joking. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to our show, and we will catch you next week.